Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are going to get started in a few minutes, but before that, we're just going to have some chat introductions. So your name, your pronouns, your location, including what native land you're calling in from. And if you're unsure, you can use that link, native-land.ca, to look it up. And then if you're actively working on a community capital project, feel free to shout that out, or if you have a business that's doing a community capital raise. And we are in a meeting rather than a webinar, which means you'll be able to see everyone else. So if you want to see just the presenters, you can navigate to the top right of your Zoom screen and click on speaker view, and that'll make things look a little less cluttered. But we do have a big crew of presenters today. And then finally, Hao Chin Gao is on this call providing tech support. So you can message Hao Chin if you have any questions. All right, I think I'm gonna get started. So, let's see, find my notes here. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Mika. I'm Mika Fisher. I'm the managing director here at NC3. And I want to start us off today with a land acknowledgement. So I'm calling from so-called New York City and Ridgewood, Queens. This is part of the unceded land of the Lenape and Canarsie peoples. And we're meeting today on a virtual platform, of course, as we often do. But I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land that we each call home, particularly in the work that we do together, because we're here to discuss and build ecosystems for stronger local economies. And none of that would be possible without the past and ongoing stewardship of Native peoples. So we wanted to start off with that. NC3's mission is to educate, advocate, innovate, and activate community capital. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, community capital is a set of strategies that allows people of any economic status to invest in their community. So just as an introduction, we want to remind everyone that NC3 has developed a set of 4 principles of community capital. So we like to say that community capital is inclusive, fair and equitable, it empowers and serves all stakeholders, it facilitates shared prosperity, and all of those are detailed on our website, and you can really dig into them and hear some examples of what we mean by those 4 principles. But we want to lay those out at the beginning so that you have kind of a sense of what we're talking about. And then finally, as an introduction to NC3, we want to make sure you all know that we are a membership organization. We're a coalition. So we encourage you to look into membership and see if it's a good fit for you. We try to make it affordable, sliding scale for either you as an individual or your organization. And Hao Chin just posted our membership link in the chat. Thank you for that, Hao Chin. So I'm just going to give an overview of what we're all doing here today. This is our 3rd and final session in Community Capital Summer. You can see the previous sessions online. The recordings are all on our website. And the purpose of this session is really to help individuals or groups who are interested in actively building a community capital project to better understand what resources we have available for you. So here at NC3, as I mentioned, we want to support the proliferation of community capital. So we aim to make our content, or the majority of our content, free and accessible, easy to read, something that's really going to support the growth of this for people who may have no experience in the field. We'd like to take you from that place to being able to execute a project. But we're dealing with pretty complicated information. Requires a lot of legalese sometimes, it requires financial information. It's dense, and kind of navigating all that online can be difficult, and it's hard to know where to start. So the goal of this session is to introduce you to some of our most useful resources and to make sure you know how to use them. So the technical assistance providers who created these resources or who know them well are all here today to discuss when and how to best use them. So I'm going to walk you through our website, make sure you know where to find everything, and then those folks, including me, are going to give you tips on how best to use these resources. And the resources live on two hubs online. The first is NC3's website, which is nc3now.org. And the second is called the Local Investing Resource Center. That is available at localinvesting.org, and you can also get there from NC3's website. So today we are going to showcase 6 tools and then 1 program, kind of a tool, 1 emerging program. And I'm just going to walk you through it right now. So our first stop over here is on our website. If you go to nc3now.org, this is what you're going to be looking at. I'm actually going to make my screen a little bit bigger to make sure all formatting is right. And the first thing I wanted to talk with you about is the Community Capital Toolbox. It's available here. This is the principles that I mentioned a little bit earlier. But here's the Community Capital Toolbox. I've covered this tool in the 2 previous webinars in this series, so I'm going to give it a pretty brief overview this time. But just some background is that the idea for this came out of a listening tour that some of you actually participated in. And I heard about early stage groups that were really excited about community capital. They want more community investing in their neighborhoods, but they don't know where to start. There's a lot of mechanisms. They weren't sure what was the right fit for them. So as I mentioned, community capital is a set of strategies that allows people of any economic status to invest in their community. And we like to say a set of strategies because there's a lot of different tools in our toolbox that help open up that process. So this community capital toolbox is a guide to all the strategies that we've seen to activate community capital. And I just want to note that this is a living document and it can develop over time. We're actually hoping that it develops over time and that there are more ways to activate community capital through regulatory change and legal change over time. But yeah, so if you ever keep looking back at it, see if there are any changes, and you can also suggest changes or feedback. There's a form at the bottom for that if you've used a tool in your community that you don't see represented here and you think other people should be doing it. So what I do want to note about this toolbox is that there are 2 different audiences. They're summarized right here. The first is community builders who are excited to build the local investing ecosystem, but they're not affiliated with a particular business. And then the second is businesses or projects like a housing or commercial space development project who want to raise money from their communities. I think that's an important part of their development process. So that's how you can read it. And if you scroll down, the first section will be community builders. Once you get to the bottom of that, you'll see the businesses or projects. And then all of these are accompanied by an input meter, which is a rough measure of the time and resources that each tool takes. So that's important because you might realize you've got a small group of people, an investment club or network could be easier for you than jumping all the way down to a community investment fund, which can be a challenging process. We put a scale, a range from 7 to 10. It can take a lot of effort and time and money to really get one off the ground. And then when do you use this tool? Who is this for? So I would say this tool is best used at the start of your community capital journey to really give you the basics of what we mean by this and to give you ideas to inspire you. And it can also be used to educate other people in your community at the start of your journey. So you might be really excited about this idea, but really this is not something that's going to happen by just individuals getting excited. It's going to happen collectively. So you can always use this, point them towards it, or if you want more out of it, feel free to contact me if you want to run an info session about this in your community. I've done that a few times now, and I would be happy to continue that process. So this is kind of our go-to 101 tool. The next thing I'm going to point you towards, as I mentioned, is the Local Investing Resource Center. So you can find the link to that really easily on our website under Our Work, and it's available right here. You can read a little bit about the history, but I already have it pulled up here. So the home of local investing. So this is called the Local Investing Resource Center. NC3 took on this work about a year and a half ago, but we did not create this from scratch a year and a half ago. It has been stewarded by a few other people, including Janice's organization. Janice Shade is here on the call. But this really was seeded a long time ago, a few years ago, by some organizers in Washington State who had been running the East Jefferson County Local Investing Network, or the Lion. That is a really cool, successful local investing network, and they were getting all sorts of requests from people to learn about what they were doing and how they were doing it. And they decided we should just centralize this information instead of doing one-off conversations with everyone who wants to start their own local investing ecosystem. So they were able to secure funding for the project, and a lot of the content and context comes from the real-life success of that model. So like the Community Capital Toolbox, there's different pathways depending on who you are as a reader. You can see them summarized here. Are you a local investor? This is an individual. Are you a community builder? This is someone who wants to create more structure around their local investing, wants to do it in community with other people. Are you a business owner, or are you an investment advisor? So I am going to cover the first three, sort of, and then I'm going to pass it off to some other people so I can stop talking and let someone else take the reins for a bit. But we'll start with local investors over here. So in this resource area, you're going to find how-to guides and other resources that really support you as an individual that's new to this world in the process of finding, evaluating, making, and monitoring your local investments. So you'll see in all of these resource areas, there's modules that you can click through. So there's really a lot of content in here, and I would set aside some time to read this if you're really excited about it. Getting started, where you'll land on every page, gives you the basics. What is local investing? Is it safe? What should you expect? The making investment section is awesome because it's got links to things like due diligence worksheets, ways to calculate and evaluate local investments. This has some really amazing tools. And then finally, managing your portfolio covers tracking and other considerations like liquidity, what to expect long-term. So this is kind of a good individual how-to guide. Jumping over to community builders. So this is a resource area for community organizers or individuals who are trying to find other people to join their team. That's nonprofit leaders, economic development professionals, government officials, or just engaged people, engaged citizens, and those who want to create aggregated pools of capital. So here you're going to find how-to guides, first, just generally about building a local investment ecosystem, and then specifically around two of these different tools that were in our toolbox: community investment funds and investment clubs and networks. And I just want to highlight something in the investment clubs and networks section. We recently were able to put up some tools that were available to us from the Colorado Solidarity Fund. They're an investment club based out of Denver. There's pretty specific rules and regulations around investment clubs rather than networks, so that's something to take a look at here. But they offered up templates that they've been using for their operating agreement, membership agreement, and so forth. So if you're excited about that model, this is a great place to start. And finally, I'm going to pass it off to some of my co-panelists here, Brett and Cameron, for the businesses section. This is a new resource area. It's literally just created, and there's going to be more eventually in this. We're under development right now, and we're actually seeking support for this. So if you or anyone you know in your ecosystem is really excited about supporting businesses who want to raise community capital, let me know. But we do have a really critical resource here, thanks to Cameron and Brett, that can get you started as a business who wants a business or other project or organization that wants to raise capital from your community yourself. So I am going to pass it off to Cameron and Brett, and I'll show you where to find that here, Raising Community Capital.
Great, thank you. And thanks for NC3 for hosting this fun demo day. Really excited to be here. So The product that or I guess I think product's the right word, that we're showing off is our capital raising workbook. And so Cameron and I are both attorneys, and we've had, I would say, the pleasure of working with a number of different like community capital raises. And in order to help organizations and businesses try to really take ownership of that process, guide that process, reduce legal fees, we helped develop this work. We collaborated to create this workbook. And this, although we're both attorneys, this document is not like heavy on legal. It's intended instead to be a resource for you and your neighbors or your peers to come together and think about why and how do we want to raise community capital. And so there's a little bit of introduction, but if you want to jump to page 16, just to show you guys, the bulk of the document is actually a workbook that, whether it's, a committee of your cooperative that's seeking to do a new fundraise, or a neighborhood group that's been doing some mutual aid and wanted to get organized for a new project, or a nonprofit that's seeking to do some fundraising to buy a building, things like that. You can go through, or even just an individual trying to evaluate, like, how do I want to really create? I know that like a traditional path of like a venture fund or whatever isn't quite right for me, but how can I articulate what's unique about the capital raising strategy that I want to do? How can I take ownership of the process? And that's what you can really go through the workbook section that makes up the bulk of this. The result is that you'll end up with this organized set of materials that you can then go and share with your lawyer or other advisors that really will help accelerate and guide and give you, again, that the ownership and the over the process that you hopefully will soon thereafter launch and succeed in. Yeah, so let me just check my list of prompts, make sure I got everything. Yeah, so I think, Cameron, you want to finish up?
Sure. Yeah. So thanks for having us as well. I'll echo Brett's comments. Yeah. So as Brett said, we're both attorneys, and so the question of like, at what point in the project lifecycle would you use this? If you are, the obvious answer to that, of course, is if you've already decided that you want to do a community capital project, and maybe you haven't hired an attorney, but you want to kind of flesh out some of these questions. That's an obvious answer of this would be a great tool for you. But I also feel like this tool is also good for those who just kind of don't know where to start. This combined with the resources that Mika has already laid out. In consultations that I have, that is often what people say. I don't know where to start. And because the workbook provides a little bit of an introduction into what community capital is and how it implicates securities laws, it can give somebody or a group, an organization thinking about community capital, a little bit of a foundation of what it means and what they might be getting into. And simply skimming some of the questions, even if you're not ready to fill them out yet, can really provide a little bit more of an idea of what it might look like, or what a community capital raise might look like, bringing it out of the abstract into something tangible. So I really do want to encourage folks that are at a range of places in the community capital journey to take a look at it, and to, feel free to pick out what questions are alive for you and your organization right now. Even if you don't feel prepared to fill out the whole thing, it can be useful at a variety of stages. So tips for how to use it are, I am definitely an 80s kid, so I straddle the like analog and the digital spaces. And I personally feel like printing out the workbook could be very helpful if that is accessible to you. Because again, it is set up in this workbook style that you can see. And I think that that's a good way to go through it. Or, maybe pulling it up in like some way where you can fill it out digitally would be helpful as well. Another thing that we want to stress is to, not beat yourself up or get stressed if you come across a question that you cannot answer or don't have the answer to yet. That is totally okay. These are really to get you and your organization thinking about where you want to go, why you want to use community capital, how you want to engage with your potential prospective investors, what you want that relationship to look like. So a lot of questions that you might not be thinking about when you're initially thinking about doing this raise, but that when you start working with an attorney, your attorney will ask you, and then you'll have to go back and think about it anyway. So might as well be as prepared as possible. Also can be a good way to if you're a nonprofit organization, how to engage with your board, how to get them involved early in the process as well. So yeah, and then also like definitely want to stress that this is a tool that's available to everybody. So I know that there are some technical assistance providers on this call, definitely feel free to use this with your clients if you feel like it's a good fit for them. It's totally available for you all to use. So whether you're kind of on this journey and you found found this website, this tool on your own, or if you are a TA provider and want to use it with your clients, feel free to do so. So it's available for all. Brett, is there anything else I feel like we missed?
One last example of when I used it in the past year was we had an organization with a board, but they really wanted to do a community capital raise. And so they picked out a couple of sections from this and they formed effectively a community advisory committee, people who weren't on the board, but real stakeholders in the community. And it was a really great, the response from them was that was a really productive way to sort of engage with community members, to frame the questions and really gather and organize that input. And they were able to do it. They take the lawyers out of the room, really like make it a community conversation. So that was another interesting tool or use of the tool.
Yeah. And I just stress that it's not heavy on the legal parts. It really is about facilitating those conversations that will eventually be used, the outcomes of which will be used by your attorney, but it's not going to be overwhelming in that way, not scary like sometimes the legal stuff can get. It's not like that at all. But there are places in the workbook that will sort of highlight when relevant documents for your business or your organization, we call it a document hunt, I believe. And so it does kind of give you a heads up of when, what documents you might need to gather, for your attorney later on. So, and then Mika, I think that's it. So we can pass it back to you.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much, Cameron. That was great. And I'm really excited to see this in use. So before I move on, I'm going to pass it off to Eric in a second, but I forgot to mention that we are going to have a Q&A session at the end of this. So feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go along. I'll try to compile them, and then all the technical assistance providers who are here right now will be able to answer the questions at the end. So keep them coming. So the next person I'm going to pass it off to is Eric Davis, who is part of the firm that helped put together this incredible investment advisor section of the LIRC. So if you go right over here to this tab, a lot of this has Angela Barbash front and center, but Angela is still on maternity leave. So Eric is standing in and definitely able to give all the expertise we need to hear about this section, really important section of the LIRC. So go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Mika. So I'm Eric Davis. I'm the Chief Investment Officer at Revalue, and I'm also a licensed advisor. And the reason why we created these tools was out of some of the workshops that we did back in 2019 with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. We did some community investing workshops to see what are some of the roadblocks to investing. And a lot of it came down to financial advisors are gatekeepers to a lot of capital, and they don't know about community capital. So we created some tools to help financial advisors get used to what community capital is, how to effectively deploy it in someone's portfolio. And so this is just a bunch of tools to kind of help guide where to start with community capital and things like that. So, so you can probably click on like deepen your knowledge or the other free, one of those. So just kind of highlight some of the tools on there. So we have a fact sheet that goes over some of the, just like where the progress is with community capital. You can get a lot of great information on NC3's website and other resources. So if you don't really know much about it, that kind of gives you a primer into what that's all about. Next, we provide some handouts that go to advisors, and then they can also go to clients, and then also the compliance team. And those are really the three main stakeholders in community investing, right? We want to make sure the advisors know what community investing is and how it properly fits into, your financial advice. For the clients, understanding how does this fit within your portfolio, and then for the compliance team, what are the necessary requirements to make sure that we're dotting our T's and crossing our I, or crossing our T's and dotting our I's, right? So those are some just some handouts that you can give to your clients. We white labeled some of those so you can put your own logo on there. So those are some extra resources for you. The next piece I want to talk about is the ideal deal client worksheet. So one of the things we've noticed with clients is they have a full array of values and very specific definitions of what community investing means to them. So it's a simple worksheet that an advisor can give to their client to fill out, and essentially it simplifies the process of where am I going to put my money in terms of geography, what type of companies do I want to support, things like that. So that way you can start the conversation with your clients and say, okay, this is a good parameters for what type of local investing deals you're looking to get into. So that's a nice little worksheet there. The next piece is the investment tracker template. So essentially this is an Excel spreadsheet that gives some basic information of what we track in our investment pipeline, which you can also use. I recommend if you have like a customer relation management, a CRM software, inputting that information in there is much more useful. So that way you can have automated workflows and all these different types of things. So, but the spreadsheet has all the basic information as well as a starting point. And essentially you're using that to keep up on the deals that you're coming across, make sure that you're closing out deals that are no longer available, approving deals when they come across, after you've done your due diligence, things like that. So you have a nice record of information. The next piece is the financial checklist. So these are some key metrics that we use to analyze companies. A lot of them are similar to what we look at for publicly traded companies. And then also some of the work we do outside of Revalue, I work for an economic development organization, and we use these same metrics to analyze companies. And a lot of it's based around, are they managing cash correctly? Are they profitable? Does their business model make sense? And so this spreadsheet gives you an idea of what metrics to look for to ensure that you kind of understand the level of risk with each business. And because community investing, you could have an established business that's raising capital, you could have a startup, it could just be an idea. So it kind of gives you an idea of what level of risk you have for each different type of business. And then the last piece is the due diligence questionnaire. This is an in-depth questions that we look at for companies when we're kind of getting to the last stage of everything. So this is looking at what products and service are they offering, and does it make sense? Their customer profile, the competitive landscape, company culture, their strategy. We use triple bottom line analysis. So we look at the profit, the impact on the people, and the impact on the planet. So we ask questions about that as well, whether it's something they do outside of the business or it's inherently part of the business, right? And then just maybe some other questions as well. So the idea is, you have a good understanding of this business and you can adequately reflect those risks to your clients. So again, this is, it's useful primarily for advisors, but it's also tools for the compliance team and the clients as well. So if you're looking just to get into local investing, or if you've already done a little bit of it, this is a great tool. A lot of the concepts, especially on the due diligence side, are referencing time-tested principles through the Chartered Financial Analyst associate or charter financial analyst program. If you're not familiar with it, we use a lot of those principles for justifying a recommendation for that as well. So, and just some tips you can use when using these documents. The biggest thing is try to create a system that allows you to have stop gates. So let's say, make sure you have the deal docs. If the company doesn't have the deal docs, you can, they stay at that stage. So that way you're effectively using your time wisely, because you can spend a lot of time on each individual deal. So having that set workflow helps. All right, I think that's it. I think I hammered through all that.
I think you did. Thank you so much, Eric.
Welcome.
This is a really amazing set of tools, and I think possibly our most underutilized compared to the quality. Like, they're so awesome and really could be used by financial advisors across the country. So, and if you have any connections to financial advisors or know anyone that would have interest in this, please let me know and we can help facilitate. Of course, it's all available online for free, but we can help facilitate kind of more of a hands-on approach to getting them interested in this. So I am going to actually bring us back over to NC3's website to pass it off to Janice Shade, who collaborated with us on a lot of our community investment fund resources. They're all available here. Our work community investment funds. We have both a handbook and a toolkit. And I'm going to have Janice focus on the toolkit because this is where a lot of our downloadable and interactive content exists to help you consider starting a community investment fund. So go ahead, Janice.
Hi, I'm Janice Shade. I am the founder and executive director of the Capital Innovation Lab. I was also one of the founding board members of NC3 and on the board for many years. And I did a huge project actually on the local investing resource center to help NC3 get that amazing resource where it is today. Actually, I got it to a certain point. It's amazing to see how far it's been taken since then. So it's exciting to see all the developments going on there. But as Mika mentioned, I've also been very, very involved with the movement towards community investment funds. So community investment funds where we're sourcing capital from the community to be invested back out into the community for circulating wealth opportunities, wealth building opportunities throughout a local economy. And the need for this toolkit became really apparent after the publication of the Community Investment Fund Handbook, which Mika just pointed out that's on NC3's website and was also a project with NC3 and some other folks. As we got that handbook out into the world and people started finding it and getting excited about setting up community investment funds, one thing that we started to notice is that the handbook's great. It's a good place to get started. It gives a lot of great background and information on how to get started, but community organizing groups needed more. And I also noticed this through the work that I did with many local organizations, and sometimes not even local organizations. A lot of times it was one, maybe two excited people who loved the idea of a community investment fund and wanted to get started, but had no idea where to begin. So that's what this toolkit is really designed for. One of the parts that I want to highlight is the 5 pieces that we have here. Thanks, Mika, for showing these 5 different pieces that they all line up with the Community Investment Fund Handbook and just go deeper and give you actual tools and resources to be able to follow along with the things in the handbook and go a little deeper. And the reason why you see number 1 put on the team builder matrix is because many of us believe this is the most important place to start. Especially, as I said, I've had many individuals or small teams of maybe 3 to 4 people come to me and say, we want to start a community investment fund. And more often than not, as we get working together, they start to realize that they might have bitten off more than they can chew. There's a lot of work involved with setting up a community investment fund. So this matrix is designed to help you set up a team, a well-rounded team, both in terms of just the experience and all of the different backgrounds that people bring, but also the way that they function on a team, so that you are finding people that are coming from the different areas of a community that you need covered. You know, you're going to want somebody who is deeply rooted in community organizing. You're going to want somebody perhaps who has some connections to city or local government. You're going to want somebody who has some technical expertise and some financial expertise and legal advisors. So this matrix is meant for teams, either existing teams to fill out, figure out what holes they need to fill, or if you're just one person that wants to get started, this is a great way for you to start identifying those kind of folks that you need on your team. So you can work through this matrix and start to fill in the gaps of your team. So then once you have your team built, then you can start moving on into the nitty-gritty of getting your community investment fund designed. And that's where the next piece is, to look at your investment thesis. This is where you start thinking about your theory of change, about your theory of change, and what kind of economic impact you want to have with your fund. And then also, what is it that makes you special? You're going to have to attract investors into your fund. So you need to be able to demonstrate out into the community what expertise you bring to make people become inspired to invest in you. So this worksheet helps you think through all the different parts of a really concise and direct investment thesis. You're going to boil it down to one sentence. It might be one long sentence, but really think about one sentence. And this takes you through every different part of that different sentence to work through the different pieces that you'll need to put together. And what this becomes then, once you have this investment thesis designed, it becomes kind of the touchstone for your organizing team that you can always refer back to when you start thinking about new ideas or where things could go. Let's bring it back and look at what was our theory of change. What is the economic impact? Are we still on the right track? It becomes just a great kind of check and balance as you're moving through the process of setting up your fund. The other tools that you'll find in the toolkit really start to get into the nitty-gritty. This is where the real work starts to begin. So you're looking at the financial forecast. How big of a fund are you planning to grow, and is that excuse me, is that fund going to be enough to make a meaningful difference within your community? And is it a fund that's realistic that you can attract enough investors for? So there are great tools in here to help you figure this out. And the tools will actually help you figure out on both sides about the designing a fund that will have enough funding within it to make a meaningful impact in your community, as well as starting to look at how you're going to go about attracting investors and how many you would need at all the different levels. And then finally, we have this operating structure checklist. And this is, excuse me, while I say the team builder matrix is, that's the most important place to start, this operating structure checklist is the most important place to end before you start that fund. This is the place that often brings people up short when they start thinking about what does it actually take to establish and maintain a fund, meaning getting the money into the fund and then making investments out of the fund, managing it, having the communication channels set up with your investors, with your investees. This checklist covers kind of the full gamut of what it takes, from the back office bookkeeping that you'll need to have done, as well as investor relations pieces, what kind of communication and outreach are you going to need to set up. And it gives a way to look at it. And Mika, if you could click on the checklist tab down below, just down below on this spreadsheet. Yeah, thanks. What you can do is you can start to assess, of all of these things that you need to be thinking about for operating your fund. Do you have resources in place, or are you going to have to bring in a new resource? And if that new resource, it doesn't necessarily mean hiring a new person. It might, or it could be some kind of outsourcing, whether you are outsourcing to a consultant or another firm that can do this, or perhaps getting some software that can help you with this. So it really helps you to think through everything that you're going to need and where you're going to be sourcing these different resources from. And then you can start to put the cost on it and take a look at how much it's going to cost you on an annual basis to run this fund. Because in the long run, what you're going to need at the very end of the day is the financial forecast for the operations of the fund, to make sure that once you get this thing set up and it's running, are you going to have the funding that you need to keep it up and running? So it's very detailed, but it's designed to be that way, because it's meant to help you think through all of these different aspects before you go too far down the path of raising your first few dollars into your fund. You really have to think through these things. There's a lot here, and NC3 absolutely has resources to help with guiding your team through. I've worked with many communities. A lot of this came out of the work that I've done with community organizing teams, and it's meant to be a guide for others. So please do call on NC3 if you need some guidance as you work through these things. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Janice. Well, that leads perfectly to our second to last tool that I'll cover pretty quickly because we're running a little low on time. But if you go to our work and look at Technical Assistance Directory, this is our newest program, literally launched this week. Where this came from is that we have all these resources online. You just heard about most of them. They get people going on the first steps towards creating their own community capital project. But once they get to a certain point, as was mentioned, particularly by Brett and Cameron, you do want to talk to an attorney. You might want to talk to a fundraising expert. We've got a lot of people in our network who are really specialized and trained in this. So NC3 doesn't have the capacity to take on every community capital project. Hopefully, we want there to be so many of them. But we are a connector in the field, and our members particularly are experts in a wide range of disciplines. So as a member, if you agree to operate within our community capital principles that I referenced, you are able to join our newly launched Technical Assistance Directory. And anyone who visits our website is able to see it. So if you come to our technical assistance page and scroll down to here, this is our live database where you can look at technical assistance providers, what services they provide, what categories they're working in. You can move this around however you want. It's pretty interactive. And then look at things that are important for you when you're starting out. Customer experience really gets to the intake process. So, if you're worried about having to pay a bunch up front for initial consult, this is the kind of thing that our technical assistance providers have detailed here, like 45-minute introductory sessions, booking links, all of that. Rates, if there's geographic locations that they specialize in, those are considered there as well. And then you have the information right away you need to get connected to them, their preferred email and their website if you just want to learn more. So this is an awesome place for your next step if you feel like you need that specialized support. And the last thing I'll say is that you can filter this database if you want, if you are kind of savvy on databases, you feel comfortable with this. You're looking specifically for, say, fundraising support. You can add in these operators and it will filter up, actually no, has any of fundraising. And this includes everyone. It narrows it down to everyone who is able to support you on fundraising specifically. So you can do that for any of these categories. And I am going to pass it off now to our final resource, which is really a program more than anything. So I'm going to pass it off to Chris Miller, our board chair, who has been working on the Community Capital Accelerator.
Thank you, Mika, and panelist friends and non-panelist friends. Great to see you all here today. The Community Capital Accelerator is kind of something that we came up with as a result of some of the work that has been articulated today that we've seen, and in particular, looking at communities holistically who really are interested in this and want to find a way to do it. So the goal, and really this goal is the goal that we have for all of our work, to create vibrant, sustainable, and equitable local economies, which are supported by local ownership and local investment. These we call community capital communities. So the challenge that we've faced really for the last decade is that local investment, in particular by retail investors, this is the euphemism, the nice euphemism we're using instead of non-accredited investors these days. That's a new way of sourcing capital. And when we look broadly across the economy of the US, while we've had a lot of success, and in fact, in investment crowdfunding, in particular, we crossed over $1 billion worth of investment, over 1 million investors at the end of 2021. Still, in the grand scheme of things, the work that we've done scratches the surface on what we hope and believe needs to happen. And certainly for part of the work that we've been doing and that we've articulated today, in particular around the LIRC, it's really tough to figure out what do we do if you're not fortunate and have one of a handful of folks, some of whom are on the call today, who know this space. It's really difficult to do. So what we have devised is what we've called the Community Capital Accelerator. And if you go to the next slide, Mika, great. It's the solution. Well, it's one of the solutions, and certainly there are other ways to get there. But we've taken a really community approach to this and said, essentially, if a community comes to us and they identify, look, we want to do a community capital project, but we really don't know exactly what we should do, and they agree to the community capital principles that Mika's articulated earlier, then NC3 will come. So we'll bring our own folks in and folks in our network and evaluate the community. One of the things that we're going to look at is just what Janice talked about, that local team who's there, and do you have the right people who can help you accomplish this project? And then after we do that evaluation, we will then kind of bring, again, those resources that some of them are in our TA advisor list and other colleagues in the industry, where we can bring legal expertise sort of specific to the project that you would be working on. And I should say that for this accelerator pilot program that we're doing, you don't need to have a project in mind at the outset. If you simply commit to a community capital project, we can help you identify what's a really good project to start with. If you have a really good project to start with, that's great too, but we can help you with that process. So then we would looking at what that project looks like. Here's the legal expertise you need for it. Here's the technical expertise that you need for it. And in many cases, training that you can do. You know, part of what we are trying to do with NC3 and this movement is build many communities who are doing this and other experts who are doing it. So the training piece can be really important for community on a variety of fronts. Then essentially we would walk through that capital raise with you. So kind of holding your hand, making sure the right people are there so that we can optimize the success or the possibility of success for the project. So we've launched this in Michigan and we are working with several communities. But I think officially today we're saying if you're not in Michigan and you're interested in participating in this pilot project that we're doing, we would be happy to talk to you about that. And we have the capacity to help certainly more than a handful of communities who might be interested in bringing NC3 and this accelerator to your community. So I think I did that in record time, Mika. And-
Yeah, you nailed it, Chris.
All right, great. Thank you.
I am going to stop sharing so that we can see more of our presenters for a question and answer session. So I have one question from the audience right now, which is a big one. So I'll present it to everyone. But afterwards, feel free to add more questions or just unmute. So the question I got was, seems to me that improving access to the three big pools of money would enhance and mobilize community investment. Any resources at NC3 that would help the Community Capital Network mobilize pension funds to free up investment for local investing, or suggestions for approaching corporate or philanthropic funds to support enabling conditions for community investing projects. I have some answers, but I'm going to let other folks talk.
So I'll go ahead and kick it off. You know, and a lot of times the questions we're getting, the short answer and response is no, is no, you know, because we are really on the cutting edge of a lot of this stuff. But I would say, you know, again, we have colleagues who've been looking at the pension issue, and Cameron potentially could speak to that maybe. But in terms of approaching, you know, sources of capital, significant sources of capital, the first thing I would say about this is that, you know, what we're really most interested is in local sources of capital. So we would encourage you to make sure that you have local buy-in and local communities are interested in it. Because one of the interesting things that happen when you turn to philanthropic capital or capital from industry or corporations, if you already demonstrate support for the community for this project, then that really encourages those sources of significant capital to come on the table. One program that'll illustrate this really well is Honeycomb Credit recently launched a program where they partner with foundations, and the foundations have basically certain objectives based on their mission. And when a project that meets the criteria for the foundation comes forward and they've raised a certain amount of money from the community, then the foundation's money is then also invested alongside the community. So I think that's one way in thinking about this. But again, first, make sure the community is there in support, then go to the larger sources of capital.
I guess I can speak to the pension fund piece. I'll take off my NC3 hat for a minute and put on my Sustainable Economies Law Center hat. I'm a staff attorney there, and we did start a project, I guess a couple years now, in collaboration with Lift Economy and Michael Schumann, called thenextegg.org. And we initially were looking at how to take retirement funds off of Wall Street. We weren't specifically looking at pension funds. We were looking at initially how to use solo 401ks and self-directed IRAs, and specifically really focusing on solo 401ks because they allowed for checkbook control, meaning that you could have a lot more control over where you invested. We did continue to run into a lot of barriers there, which sort of like raised a lot of questions about whether it really even made sense to hold money in retirement vehicles, and did it make more sense just to take it out of the retirement vehicles and have more flexibility to invest locally. That community is also now kind of grappling with questions that are even bigger than that, which is, should we even be saving for retirement? Is there a way for the community to collectively take care of each other, you know, in retirement? All very, very big, juicy questions. But if you are not a member of that or haven't seen those resources, there's a lot of previous recordings, and if you go to past events on that community, it's a Mighty Networks community, and there's a lot there. But yeah, there are a lot of barriers like prudent investment rules and things like that that we haven't been able to quite crack yet. And then similarly, the Law Center has been looking at, you know, how to push the bounds of corporate and philanthropy. Specifically, we've looked at how to get them to fund cooperatives more. And there are, again, a lot of barriers there that we haven't quite cracked yet. So we don't have any outward facing resources on that particular question. But yeah, very juicy questions, and welcome others to answer as well.
I do want to note there's a follow-up question from John in the chat that says, my understanding is that a lot of those larger sources of capital allocation require Series 7 licensees and sometimes more to issue securities. Maybe Eric, as a financial advisor, can speak to that.
Yeah, that's it. So in regards to some of the bigger pools of capital, it's similar to the individuals in that a lot of these big foundations and corporate funds have financial advisors as gatekeepers, and typically, even though that money should be going towards mission aligned investments, sometimes it's not. So yeah, that can be so a lot of what we've been doing is trying to either break into those foundations or assist those advisors. Unfortunately, because some of these advisors may be part of bigger organizations, they have more stringent compliance rules, and they're not allowed to talk about community investing. So that's like another barrier that you have to go through. So and that's so we've talked about partnering with some of these organizations to help kind of be the almost like a separate manager to them, so that way they could legally pass that over to us, and then we could do that deal. But it's something that we've been trying to tackle, is how do you get some of these organizations that seems like it's a slam dunk to put their money into community capital, and they just don't. That's because the people that hold their money tell them it's too risky, you can't do it. So
Let me make one other comment on John's question. So in a lot of these cases, we aren't looking to the larger capital sources to actually issue securities. The entity is going to issue the security. So those larger sources of capital would be investors in that security, essentially. So.
Great. Any other burning questions before we close out? All right, well then we'll be ending right on time. I do have a request for all our lovely participants, which is to fill out our impact survey. It's super quick. How-Tien is going to post it in the chat right there. Takes about 3 minutes. We really just want to get a better sense of who our audience is and how to increase our impact. And as we've mentioned multiple times, we'd love to hear from you if you're working on a project that could benefit from these resources. So please reach out to us. How-Tien will also post my email in the chat. Chris has posted his, and I'm going to save this chat so everyone who said to reach out, we will be doing that for sure. So thank you so much for joining, everyone. It was really great to see you. And thank you to our panelists, our technical assistants, experts. They're great.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.